Alright. Here at Bizzle Academy. Getting ready for the quarterfinals of the 2023 Masters. Warming up with some older matches, which I have not seen. Including two of my favorite players. Reynor, young, chubby, 17-year-old. Just getting started, but already dominant. Reynor, 2019 WCS final. This is group stage against herO. Best, in my opinion, best Protoss player in the world. Definitely the most interesting and my favorite player to watch as a Protoss guy. Certainly my favorite Protoss player to watch. Let me see what this sounds like on the stream super fast. Alright, so I want to do a Scarlet's IEM 2018 run. For sure, at some point. Okay, I can turn up their commentary a little bit. So, the point of the stream is going to be that even though... Sorry, just getting adjusted here. I want you to be able to hear some of the sound. That's pretty good. This British guy is so good. I'm just listening to him. So, let me just my camera a tiny bit. A little less bright, a little less saturated. So, Reynor in his first year here had, I think, only lost to herO in a major event. And so he's almost a favorite, considering Protoss are always sort of an underdog, even with the greatest, like herO. I'm sorry. Reynor would be the favorite. herO would be considered the underdog, even though herO is almost 30 years old now in 2023 and been great now through multiple generations. So he's one of the oldest players and one of the youngest back in 2019 here. This is a ginormous map. We're at 13 minutes and herO's almost maxing out already. So the point of this of my coverage is that there are so many professional and then nobody amateur aficionados like me who are brilliant minds with StarCraft, whether they are players or not, and do a great job covering these events. And I've been watching and listening to a ton of it and will continue to. But I thought it would be cool because even if you play just StarCraft 2 or back to the 90s, the original StarCraft, oh man, herO coming with a ton of Immortals, Archons, and Centurions. It looks like he gets pushed back. Oh no, he got rid of some Banelings. And that's why I also want to put the commentary in the background so you can sort of listen to it, because these guys are brilliant commentators. But this commentary is meant for not even major StarCraft fans, but major StarCraft eSports competitive fans. And people who have put in thousands of hours and not, you know, just hundreds of hours. And that was me. I was someone who had put in hundreds for the original and to the new one, and still do. Even started playing co-op, a little bit of competitive 1v1 PvP. But then I would watch something like this, and even I would be confused about what was going on. because it's such a complicated game, and there's always a meta for games like this, where everyone's using similar groups of units, but they're doing different things, and it's not exactly the same composition of units and so forth and so on. And then everything on the screen just starts exploding and turning to poison and blood everywhere on top of that, and you're just confused. Nice work, herO, with more aggressive play. One of the reasons he's my favorite and one of the best, if not the best, Protoss player in the world is because Protoss players tend to play slow and conservatively because they're slow and expensive. But that's exactly the reason why you should be aggressive with them, because if nothing else, they can churn out a small number of very powerful units early on, even if it's expensive. And so just keep attacking with increasingly small and then medium-sized armies of powerful units. Protect them, protect those units with support units. Know who should be in front and in the back and when you should retreat, but keep attacking. Alright, here we go. herO versus Reynor. So yeah, so now I never know whether... And then the music gets super loud. Alright, so this is where we can just jump forward. Alright. Those are the map list at the bottom. So I'm going to try and talk technical stuff and nerd out and geek out watching these guys play awesomely in my favorite game franchise of all time by a long shot, even before my most recent re-addiction, you know, 5th or 6th time in my life or whatever was StarCraft, but now really watching competitive play for the first time and wanting to cover it even myself and play it myself. But I do want to talk about some of just the basics of StarCraft. What's a Nexus? You know, what do these buildings do? You know, why is the beginning of the game slow and it's just drone creatures moving minerals and barrels of gas back and forth? Basics of the game. And then also people who are familiar with it but not familiar with the competitive play as much, with the basic strategy of how this goes. And then what differentiates the players. So that's what we're gonna try and do.
Dude, oh, you can see, yeah. Oh, he's singing. He's got music playing right now. Yeah, he's having a good time. He's just jamming, man. He's channeling his.
Wow, Reynor's really getting down. I mean, he's such a charismatic. He's a little chubby as a young kid, but he's a really good-looking guy as a 20-year-old now. Very charismatic, very emotional, a very exciting Italian player. But to see him rocking the Red Bull hat, who sponsors him, and listening to music in his ears, would love to know what his soundtrack is. It's great for the sport. You know, the part of the problem is it's when you're very serious about StarCraft. It's amazing to watch these Korean geniuses, but they just don't emote very much or show a lot of personality because it's not in their culture. It's actually against some. Things that you're supposed to do in your culture, and I understand that, but to get a global audience, especially in the Americas and Africa and so forth, where we like the NBA and soccer, which have, these big personalities both on and off screen. You got Messi and Ronaldo and LeBron and Michael Jordan and Kobe. I know these are big, quote-unquote normal sports, but it only takes a few players like Reynor and Scarlet, who I've already covered and will cover more, and Oliveira, who's another favorite of mine, might be the best player in the world, who's also going to be playing starting tomorrow in the final round of the 2023 ESL Masters.
The level of gameplay has been phenomenal. It's been all way better. Best of fives have definitely delivered.
a lot more than the best of threes did last year.
Oh yeah.
So they're talking about how things immediately get better when it's best of 5, which is obvious with StarCraft. It's just not enough of a test between 2 players to play 3 games, especially when it only goes 2. You know, when you win 1 by luck and then the momentum shifts, and then you immediately, you know, the losing player, even if they're better, you know, only has 1 more loss and whatever. Goes to 7 for the finals, which is great. That's very long. 5 is the perfect amount. A few 7-minute games, a few 30-minute games, maybe a 60-minute games if things go really crazy.
And he kind of shows something aggressive and then just transitions once your scouting's done into a bit more economy, into some more upgrades. Reynor's got to just be comfortable, I think, stepping a little bit closer towards the edge of greediness, you know.
A little bit more volume for them.
Get yourself set up, and if you can get 4 or 5 more drones out by the 6-minute mark, that can make a world of difference in the long run.
I think overall he's going to be quite happy with what he's scouted here so far, right? A standard Stargate opening into an Oracle. This is the same build.
So all of these games, of course, are on YouTube. I'm watching this on YouTube. I highly recommend you go listen to these great broadcasters and watch these great games. So, you know, they decided early on that StarCraft 2 was going to be released with 3 games, basically. 1 game with 3 games. And people were very angry about this because the original StarCraft, you got a full single-player Terran campaign, a full single-player Zerg campaign, a full single-player Protoss campaign. Those are the 3 major races. I'll talk about that more. And all the multiplayer stuff. Although, you know, they famously released a huge expansion called Brood War, which was basically a full second game of the original StarCraft, and that is the one game that made StarCraft into StarCraft when it comes to international eSports, because it added a bunch of units and complexified the game and made it way more strategic and way more wide open and well balanced. Made it the first major eSports sport ever, arguably, at least at the high levels. But even though in 2010 they released a very good Terran campaign as the first of the StarCraft 2 games, which would be released over a number of years, which is Terran campaign called Wings of Liberty. It's very, very good. It's still very fun to play. But they did have built in what's still today, 13 years later, the majority of the forces in terms of both units and structures and even maps, or just the way the multiplayer game is played, built in already in 2010 with that first Wings of Liberty release. And so while some people didn't want to have to pay $60 in 2013 for the Zerg campaign, Heart of the Swarm, which wasn't amazing, just to open up multiplayer options, and then again with Legacy of the Void, which they ultimately released for free, which was smart. Even though the Protoss campaign is the best and the biggest, it was the last in 2015, I think. It's super high budget. It's totally worth $60 on its own just for the single-player campaign, at least for me, who's played it numerous times through, and I'm still playing the Protoss single-player campaign. It too added a number of structures, and like the Oracle, which we've been seeing a lot of earlier, units, 2 or 3 for each of the 3 races, but all of them very distinct, doing lots of stuff, making the game more interesting, and almost all of them are heavily used. So here we are in 2019, so this is already a number of years after, you know, Legacy of the Void, which is the final major commercial release of StarCraft 2. And so most of, basically what I'm saying is, the units that are being played, you know, today in 2023 in the tournaments, like the ones going on now, the ESL Masters 2023, while the meta of the game has changed, and the dynamics have changed, and some of the best players have changed, or moved up and down a little bit, like Reynor here, they could already tell, just listening to them in 2019, that this kid was going to be one of the best, and indeed he is, one of the 5 or 6 or 7 best in the world now in 2023, and absolutely dominating in the current ESL Masters. herO, of course, being an older guy who broke up his career by going to the Army, playing before and after the Army like many Koreans, remains good into his late 20s and now 30s, which is incredibly impressive for esports. Even though this isn't like Call of Duty twitchiness with a controller, your reflexes need to be even way sharper here than in a shooter. Doing, these guys are doing like 500 actions per minute, clicking 10 to 15 times per second. At 30 years old, it is already kind of old, just like it is in professional sports. Once you hit your 30s, it's no different in esports, especially when it involves, fast twitch reflexes, which StarCraft, of course, does. And here it is, the Oracle, almost 10 minutes into the game, which she built early. It's specifically a harassment unit. Kill a few workers here. Take out a few, lightweight infantry units there. It can spy. It can see cloaked units. It can see the Zerg, which are the ugly aliens here. Can see when they're burrowed underground. Can see them. And here it goes. Talk about both sides have units that are carrying other units or can transport other units. Right here is the War Prism with the Protoss. I mean, that's a massive Protoss army sitting at the top of the hill there. Further than the center of the map. Reynor is very much aware that this army cannot get into his bases or it's going to be total disaster with those Archons and Immortals. And here comes the Reynor attack. And brilliant attack by Reynor. Absolutely brilliant. Brilliant. That huge Protoss army I was just raving about, which was going to destroy Reynor's bases and armies, just wrecked herO's perfectly constructed Protoss army, which was just sitting there. And honestly, herO rarely just builds up a big army, puts it on your front door, and lets it sit there. He did it here. He got punished for it greatly by Reynor, and who's now attacking him. And herO, it would be a miracle to come back and win at this point, after he was about to win. And that's why herO almost never plays this way. He almost never builds armies that big. He builds more small to medium-sized armies and just constantly is attacking, often at multiple places at once. I do not believe herO Reynor have played any long series. Like, maybe they've played online or in, not premier tournaments, single games here or there, but like a 5-game series in a major world championship. This is the only one that I'm aware of. This 4 years ago. I don't know if they're going to play it at some point this year. But I have to imagine herO, as veteran as he is, and relatively old, as I keep saying, for a StarCraft player as he is, I'm sure take some lessons from this match from Reynor, who is new and young and has the advantage of being relatively unknown to guys like herO who have been around forever. So he still manages to get a big army into the base, and the High Templars are getting their magic off, their psionic storms. And, this is what's great about herO. That huge, big army, which he just had at the front door of Reynor, got destroyed when it shouldn't have gotten destroyed so easily by Reynor. But herO had... herO had... Protoss units build so slowly and are so expensive to build compared to the other two races. And so when you lose a big army like herO does often, because he's constantly attacking, you lose a big army, it's so expensive and slow to rebuild unless you have infrastructure to do it. herO is amazing at it with the economy. He's constantly rebuilding a second and even third backup army in the background while these battles are going on. He also knows when to save units. But that first big army that he had, which maybe I'll jump back to at the end of this match, which was sitting at the top of the hill ready to invade with all the pretty giant, powerful Protoss units like the Archon, which looks like big glowing genie or whatever, and would have probably destroyed Reynor, just sat at the top of the hill, and herO lost concentration for a second, and Reynor attacked him, and
Each one does as much damage as a zealot, basically. It's crazy once they get that adrenal upgrade.
throughout so this is the 4th of 5 matches. I'm pretty sure I saw that Reynor wins this. I mean, I kind of knew ahead of time that Reynor was going to win, even though I think it does go 5. Does this go 5? This does, I believe, go 5. But even though herO's up 2-1 in games, to me, he's been playing very sloppy, which he's been accused of a lot. I would argue there's a lot of times when herO's just being crazy and inventive and it looks sloppy. Here he really has been sloppy and is not taking Reynor seriously enough. And Reynor going down 2-1 in this series, I think personally, is a benefit in this case. With hindsight, 2020 vision or whatever, hindsight, in hindsight, it benefits that Reynor comes in as a relative unknown and herO's a little cocky and complacent. But look, another giant herO army. I mean, it's unbelievable. I thought for sure when the army on the hill got destroyed by Reynor, he might have one more attack. This is his second attack since then. He's got all the major units, heavy robotics units, Archons, those big glowing genies, the Stalkers, which everyone uses, which can blink. They do little jumps, everywhere. And, which you can't see too well because they're well ensconced in the army, they're spellcasters, the High Templars, who kind of levitate and cast these big storms. And they're especially effective against the Zerg here, who are, the classic bug, swarm, alien creature, who are cheap and are meant to die in large numbers, but also attack in huge numbers. Protoss are the opposite. They're expensive. Their armies, while they can look big and intimidating, are still relatively small, and you need to protect them because it's so slow and expensive to rebuild. And so a third great... the first attack, which was going to be the biggest and should have ended this, and I think herO was trying to end this entire 5-game match with that big army, which is why he got cocky and complacent. That got wrecked. He sent a medium-sized force of Stalkers after that mostly lost an attack on Reynor. Then he somehow, herO, got another big Protoss army, which costs a fortune, because he's spending in the background. They're not showing it on screen mostly because it's not the interesting part. Now they're showing. But this economy is always running like a finely tuned, well-oiled machine in the background. So he's constantly rebuilding his Protoss army. Here he is with Immortals and Stalkers, which are the main 2 robotics units for Protoss. And Reynor's not waiting anymore. Reynor's not going to keep waiting for herO to rebuild these giant Protoss armies, especially because he's starting to build heavy air units, which are the most expensive of any of the units for any of the races in the game, are the Protoss heavy air units. And again, they're slow and expensive, but powerful, but only when games go longer than 15 minutes like this one. And they're big maps with lots of resources. Can you do it? So all these big, glowy, sexy, but impractical looking spaceships are called Tempests. And all they do is have a very long range firing mechanism, like a mini Death Star beam that can hit ground or air units. But it's slow. You have to manually do it. You have to be able to spot it because they can't see as far as they shoot. It has to cool down before you can use the beam again. They can get taken down by a lot of small and medium-sized units. I mean, it's just like all the Protoss. It's why the Protoss are perennially considered to be inferior and underdogs, no matter how great the players are. And it's been this way since Brood War and the original StarCraft in the 90s, because with the game balancing, as cool as some of the Protoss units are, and as good as some of the Protoss players are, through each generation and each manifestation of StarCraft, they just make the Protoss a little too slow to build, a little too expensive to build, and a little too hard to replace, and not do quite enough for what you're paying for. Or there's always a catch, like you have to like they have one special ability that's super powerful, but you have to micro it, and it's, you know, only lands, like disruptors, you know, only lands a small number of times. Here's the probes getting massacred by Reynor. And like I said, you know, if you go back, if you're just joining, if you go back earlier in this game, when herO had a ginormous Protoss army 5 or 6 minutes into the game, just waiting on the front doorstep of Reynor, daring Reynor to attack him before he just decimated Reynor's bases. He got complacent, Reynor destroyed that army, and while herO's mounted multiple relatively big Protoss attacks since then, you know, that was the moment, and, you know, mathematically Reynor has to win this game and win the next one, because he's gonna, I believe, end up winning this best of 5 3-2. I've not watched it before, but I'm pretty sure Reynor wins this 3-2. And so herO, being the veteran, going up, gets complacent, and the momentum has definitely changed. Here comes those Tempests, though. Those are very powerful, but for how many of them there are, I mean, those are so expensive. If you're new to StarCraft, the amount of workers and money that you need to accrue to build giant spaceships like these ones right here, the Tempest, it's so much money and time and effort, and then you have to control them manually.
His air upgrades are terrible. herO's in big trouble right now. I mean,
Yeah, and the commentators are commentating on how much trouble he's in. You know, it looks, herO's at maxed out at supply. He can't build any more units even if he wanted to, but he's moved into the Protoss late game in what should be the mid game. And, yep, and Reynor's using mid game units to just lock him down. And he's even gone for the mothership 20 minutes into the game, way too early for Protoss, for herO here. So he got cocky early with his ground army. Now he's gotten cocky with his air army. And with just a ton of anti-air Zerg units. Yeah, as the commenter said, herO's just running out of steam. He's just running out of steam. He's been sloppy and not had a good plan this entire time. Which is funny because I'm watching a lot of herO matches in games on YouTube from the last year or two, and these same commentators often accuse him of being sloppy or lazy or you know, complacent or whatever at times. And here I would have to agree with them. The ones I've been seeing, he's been pretty dominant, and so they've just been, I think he's just being creative. Here he comes with the Purification Nova as thrown by the Disruptors. Those are supposed to come before those big heavy air units in terms of build order, and that's what happened. Is, you know, he was gonna end, you know, herO being the veteran was gonna end everything with that big ground army early on. I'm gonna jump to it. Let's see, where are we? 127. But I want to jump to the huge army that he put together. To show you what I was talking about. How long did it take for him to get the big army? Let's see. Sorry, just gonna jump through the match a little bit. It came very suddenly. Okay, here it is. All right, so we're 9 minutes in. Let's go back a little bit. We're 9 minutes in. Okay, so you're seeing 1, 2, 3. You can see my mouse a little bit. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Immortals. Heavy ground attack units, a bunch of sentries who are support units to keep their shields going and keep them alive, a bunch of Archons who are like these giant genies of energy that can attack ground and air. Okay, let's go forward. He's bringing in this Warp Prism, which can carry units and transport units. And if you look at the bottom left here, you can see it. You can see here who's red moving with a huge force towards Reynor's bases. So less than 10 minutes in, look how far he is from his base though. It is a big map. He's way far back from his map. So now sitting on the top of this hill is an army that's worth, you know, close to 100 supply. You're allowed to have 200 supply total. You know, briefly, the physically smaller the unit is, the less supply it takes up. So, you know, basic infantry like Marines are just one supply, but, you know, big heavy air and ground units are 3, 4, 5, 6 supply. Protoss tend to be a lot of supply per units because, again, they're expensive and big and take a while to build, but they're supposed to be super powerful. So he's got this big army. So he's sitting on the top of the hill here, is herO.
Puts those in the Warp Prism as well, but here we go, he's deep on creep. Those Banelings find the center of the Archons and Immortals. A lot of them get into the Zealots.
You can hear the, I'm trying to see if you can hear the announcers, the Banelings blowing up. He's gone to 42. Okay, so watch this, watch this trick. So at 1 minute into the game, down here, it's the 0. Means he has no army. Okay. 2 minutes into the game, he's at 11. Okay. 4 minutes in the game, he's at 32. So this isn't the number of units, but it's the overall power of units. Because some units count as 2, 3, 4, 5 against the supply. But it's the overall power. Now here at 9 minutes, he's already at 100. He's at 66 at 8 minutes. He's at 86 at 8.5 minutes. Okay, I keep going a little too far. Okay, so we're at 9 minutes 15 seconds. Okay, so down here, you can see this big red force coming on the blue bases of Reynor, who's playing the Zerg, the ugly aliens here. Okay, so up on the hill here, this happened on the broadcast literally 10 minutes ago. I was watching this for the first time. I'm looking at this army less than 10 minutes in and going, yes, they're both maxed out in terms of their supply and have pretty big armies, quite big armies in terms of sheer numbers, although we can see statistics that, you know, the players can't see. But just looking at this Protoss force here, I'm thinking, if he attacks right now and Reynor's not totally ready, he should just be able to bulldoze through these bases because of how relatively spread out Reynor is on this big map with Zerg. Watch what happens. Watch what happens. Reynor's getting ready over here. Reynor's getting ready over here. And all of a sudden, he starts pushing on the north side, but he's got east. So he's moving all around. So herO feels pressured to attack a little bit earlier than he wanted to. The Centurions are in the back, the infantry, boom, right there. So right now, so that initial attack, as usually happens with Protoss because they're so powerful, he does take out a bunch of Reynor's army, which are these pink red numbers down here at the bottom. But watch. Okay, 108. A couple seconds go by. 76. In 5 seconds. In 5 seconds, he lost 30 supply, which is the equivalent of anywhere from 5 to 20 units, but probably like 12 to 15 powerful units. If you look up here, this all looks very pretty with all the explosions, but these explosions are because these green things here are Banelings, which are suicide bombers, which are just, you know, are little Zerg alien drones that ball up and explode with poison and explosive damage and just blow up the army. You can hear the announcers. I'm gonna turn the announcers up.
That was about 20 zealots going
and we'll go back a few seconds.
Just like that, those Banelings find
All right, so here it is. Here's the moment. Here's the moment. 9.5 minutes, even armies. herO is probably thinking he's gonna end this kid. He's thinking, oh, this 17-year-old from Italy, he's had a good year, but I'm gonna end him right now. I'm up 2-1. I have my big army. I got all my fancy units. It's completely disorganized. I mean, herO's known to be great at microing, which means micromanagement, moving individual units very fast at like a superhuman rate. And he's just waiting. But look what's going on over here. It doesn't look like a ton of Zerg units, but they can burrow underground. And while herO does have a couple of units that can see burrowed units, he doesn't have a ton and he's not prioritizing it. So I'm going to do a stop-start, but I turned up the announcers. And herO even just got an upgrade on his ground weapons, so he is about ready to attack. If you look down here at the upgrades, it shows, so you can upgrade your weapons to be, better at damaging. You can upgrade your armor to be better at soaking up damage and surviving. And you can also research upgrades that give you special abilities, which are individual to certain units. But the main ones are for better weapons or better armor. So down here, you can see herO just completed his second level ground weapons. So all of these fancy, sexy, awesome-looking Protoss alien StarCraft units, which are awesome at the right time, just got more powerful. And with their armies maxed out and herO seeming to have the momentum advantage just in terms of sheer movement, this would be the time. But he's coming onto the creep, and this is the thing about the Zerg. If you see the purple here in the mini-map down here at the bottom left, when I refer to the mini-map, it's down here. So the thing about the Zerg is, as they build structures, but also they have their queens, the queens of the hive and so forth. Specifically, one of the things you have to do is spread creep. You don't have to, but it's hard to be a great player without it. Which is all of this muck here. And as the game goes on, there's going to be more and more muck spreading because it's hard to stop the muck spreading. So other than looking ugly, the Zerg race, all of these units and the race of the Zerg being played here by Reynor, the Italian guy, everything that they do in terms of the speed they attack, how well they attack, how they heal, how fast they can move while burrowed, and all sorts of stuff. Everything is better when they're on the creep. And so when you're attacking the Zerg, attacking a Zerg base, which hero's not even at the base yet. Reynor's trying to head this off at the pass, which is part of the thing. herO thought he was going to get his upgrade with this huge army and was going to get all the way to the right off screen here to one of herO's main bases. But Reynor is almost like a Terran player, is trying to control this technically neutral territory in the middle of the map here, but it's actually not neutral because there's creep on it. And so statistically, everything that happens here with the units about to go at each other is going to statistically benefit the blue team, the purple Zerg units, even though on paper, herO, the Korean veteran with his sexy Protoss army in red, should win. I turned up the announcers. Let's let this play. But if you look at this number right here, 118, this drops by like 30 or 40 at least in 2 seconds because this unit that they're highlighting, the Banelings, which are hiding all over the place, do nothing but explode and cause tons of damage to grouped units who aren't prepared to take him out. And he doesn't have his infantry units, these Centurions, are not organized properly, and they're just not organized properly to handle it. So here it comes.
Reynor's totally happy with that. And I mean, if you force a
So now they're facing off on the creep, which favors the Zerg, but not on a base. So in the relatively middle of the map. So he jumps in with his spellcasters, tries to take out a bunch of those suicide bombers. The Banelings doesn't work, and all of a sudden, there's 20 Banelings that come through.
Oh my lord, every single zealot just gets
You can hear the broadcasters.
from the map. That was
Every single zealot.
Going down to the Banelings, and just like
Down, he's down to
herO,
40. So he went from 110 to 42 to 40 herO. His army got cut more in half, but not only that, a lot of them were Centurions or Zealots, which are just infantry units, which are only 2 supply apiece, as opposed to some of these big ones, which, you know, more. Meaning, he didn't just kill a lot of powerful units, he killed a lot of units, period. And look at this tiny damage force, which herO is running away with. Now, as this match goes on, and I'm going to turn them down a little bit.
I thought things were going great for herO, but that just got smashed.
I mean, he did stand on creep for a very long time there. It felt like
And as the announcers are saying, he was just waiting on the creep. And so with a full army, why wouldn't Reynor go? So now Reynor, of course, is going to immediately attack with his big army. He lost a lot of army supply because they were suicide bombers. But you plan on losing those units because they explode and die. That's what they do. That's all they do. But because Protoss can warp in and herO has great economic play, he's able to start rebuilding the army, as you can see down here, very quickly. But Reynor's rebuilding his army too. And the difference is, Reynor had 100 workers that whole time, and none of them got touched, which was part of the plan as the Protoss with herO here, was to kill everything, especially and including the workers. Didn't happen. So another big push. I was shocked. I couldn't believe that 2 minutes after what should have been a game and series-ending attack by herO was completely upended and ruined by Reynor with his suicide bombing banelings. I thought that was for sure the end for herO. 2 minutes later, herO already has a huge expensive army again, which is so difficult to do as a Protoss player, especially 11 minutes in the game.
But he's maxed out, right? He must be maxed out on something. I don't really know where all the units are. Oh, he's setting up a flank. Bailey's coming
so this time he actually gets into the base, and he's on the creep. He goes the right way. At least if you're on the creep, try and take out the base. But now he has to retreat again, and Reynor is bringing in Zerglings, which are small units, but they're cheap, and you can have 1 million of them from all over the map. And then he makes it seem like he's retreating, which draws herO up into the base. And no, he's just waiting for him. He's got these big queens and air units, and he's got burrowed units just waiting underground that herO can't see. And yet again, a giant herO army that was almost at 100 supply has been killed even worse than the last one. How did he even rebuild to this place? I don't even know. And if you can believe it, there's another big attack by herO after those 2 whoopings. Look. Right, and the announcers are going to say it, but you can see it again in the bottom left here in the mini-map, and another giant army. You guys don't understand, again, how expensive and how for the average human building an army this big in any kind of play, no matter how easy or hard the difficulty level or the opponent, should take forever and cost more than you could possibly get. This is his 3rd one in basically 5 or 6 minutes. He's back up to 100 supply. He's doing it again. It makes no sense. So here's the 3rd big attack when it should have been over already for him, by him, and then for him. But the roaches, broodlings, banelings, broodlords, sorry, banelings. He's got a ton of spine crawlers or whatever the hell they're called, which are the big stabby thorns that the Zerg have that are just defend against ground units. There's 2 kinds. I was confused. Spine crawlers are the ones that attack the ground. Spore crawlers are the ones that shoot up at the air. That's this one down here. It's shooting at his rescue unit.
Those Archons so big in there against Zerglings. Broodlords are coming down to defend this, but so many Zerglings go down beforehand.
So still, I would call this the 3rd and a half attack. He tries to attack just with a small army of Stalkers after 3 huge ground attacks that were way bigger than that one. That one got ruined. And again, herO's building up.
Especially if there's nothing to protect those brutes, but now we do have the infestor up.
Somehow with the Protoss, he's building almost as fast as the Zerg, who are almost free with how cheap their units are. He's at 73 after constantly going from 100 to 10, 100 to 10. So here's what changes. He starts building an end game build here too early. We're 16 minutes for a map this big and a match this competitive is really too early to start going all in on your biggest and most powerful units, which he's doing, as you'll start to see, with these very cool looking spaceships up here, the Tempests, which I've been saying over and over again how expensive to build and slow to build the Protoss units are in general. But even among Protoss units, the Tempests are the biggest and most powerful, but the most expensive and the slowest. And very difficult to use. And relatively brittle for how big and expensive they are. Here he is. So, pause real quick. So it's 17 minutes into the game. herO's already moving to what would normally be an endgame strategy, which normally wouldn't start until at least 20 or 25 minutes when you've exhausted a whole bunch of more ground attacks or mixed ground and air attacks of various sizes, which is normally what he does, but he's not doing here. He's playing like a complacent player in group stage against a young player who's unproven in Reynor, and that's how it plays out.
I actually prefer holding off on the corruptors for now because you can do this. You can't go and attack these bases nearly
So Reynor's finally going to what he's really good at, which is just sending a lot of cheap units into surprising places at opportune times of the other player's base. And he's great at it, and the tide finally starts turning with it. He's going to end up taking down this base, I think, numerous times. Meanwhile, if you look down at the upgrades, herO has only upgraded offense of one type of units. Reynor's upgrading everything.
So continuing to commit your supply here to Lingbane Ravager is actually the
herO did manage to pick off a bunch of workers, or I guess a bunch of workers were converted into structures. So here he comes at a relatively early point in terms of just the minutes of the game, 18 minutes, with the mothership, which is even more expensive than these spaceships, the Tempests. You know, I mean, this is the equivalent of going to buy a sports car and leaving the car dealer with 20 of their most expensive cars at once. And a prototype model, if you look at the mothership, that costs like, you know, 10 million American dollars on its own, and isn't even supposed to be, you know, on the street or whatever. You know, he's spending not just the farm, he's spending like 50 farms on this big late game air army. And watch what happens.
to make sure he doesn't lose his brood lords.
I really don't think he's going to do that. He's going to try to defend.
First of all, Reynor has built a bunch of brood lords, which are heavy ground attack air units. They are also very vulnerable, like those big Protoss Tempest spaceships, and can only attack the ground, and so are inferior, and they're also slow. But herO does not know that he's built them, I believe. So, you know, when you destroy a pylon, you depower anything that the pylon is powering. Those are their power plants.
I think herO is going to come back home, but he's not even going to save this. Nexus, these buildings are just
so there goes down another base.
Now also knows there are a lot of Tempests out, so now you can start adding a few more corruptors in the mix.
Both of them still have a big army. Okay, so here's Reynor as the Zerg player sitting on a big army, which I've been criticizing herO, my whole thesis here, but started with the criticism of herO that we're at 18 minutes, but at 9 minutes, at halftime from now, at 9 minutes into the game, herO had a Protoss army that was so big and powerful, should not have even been possible to make in that little bit of time, considering how expensive and slow Protoss units are. And just to the left of the screen here, where you can see at the ramp start, he was sitting with his units. At this point, Reynor did not have a base here, but it was covered in creep. And he moved onto the creep with his big Protoss army, did herO, the Korean player. And then Reynor said, well, why am I waiting for you to come to my base and attack me? You're on the creep. I already have the advantage. Let me go after you. And Reynor wrecked it. herO managed to get 2 or 3 more big ground attacks since then. All of them were foiled and destroyed. He keeps rebuilding. And now Reynor's sitting on the big army, which herO should know about. I don't know if he has scouting on this, but he must at least suspect this is happening. But the difference is Reynor is sitting on this army in his base over the creep. So he's got the advantage of being in his base with tons of air defense, by the way. So he knows the air attack's coming. He's got tons of ground units that can attack air units, so he knows that it's coming. The whole point of this base is his defensive base. He only has 8 workers. He's barely mining minerals. He's not going after any gas. All of these structures are defensive structures, and all of these units are to defend against the army composition that he knows is coming, and then to counterattack. And so even if herO knows that this army is sitting here, there's nothing he can do. He's too focused on building up his big, sexy army. Okay, let's see what happens. So here he comes. So Zerglings are the little tiny aliens, purple aliens. Okay, so this unit at the top here, Oracle, is a unit meant to annoy the other player, kill units left a little bit here, a little bit there, but it's mostly to scout. So is he here to recharge? Like, shouldn't he be out scouting to see this force that Reynor's building? So he's trying to build a new Protoss base here in the bottom left, but he just lost at least 1 base, maybe 2 in his prime area, his side of the map. So he's getting too aggressive on the expensive units that he's building. He's spreading bases into places that are out of the way of the main conflict, taking money and time and resources.
He's getting disruptors now, and I like the idea of air units and disruptors. I'm a big fan of it.
He's trying to use air units with disruptors. I know this was only 4 years ago. Okay, now you can see this huge air army. Here's where you're going to see the huge air army. And this army, which is so big and it's beautiful, it is sexy. These Tempests and this big mothership, which we're going to see better in a second, they're gorgeous to watch. Just be there, move, and especially attack and do the stuff that they do. But you're going to see how slow they move and how slow they attack and how ineffective they are, even though they cost more than a small fortune. I mean, you could buy half of a third world city, you have a developing world city with the money that makes something like this. And he's building a base in the middle of nowhere with whatever money he has remaining. Okay, so here he goes to scout. Okay, guys, I actually can make my mouse a little bit bigger. I can make it significantly bigger, actually. Oh, interesting. I can make it, and I can make it have color. Okay, so what color can I use that won't be annoying? Green looks too much like the map. Blue looks too much like the map. Pink is really strong. I think a lightish yellow. Now, I'm monitoring this on a much smaller screen than I'm watching this on, if that makes sense. Because I don't know how you guys are watching this. Okay, so here's my yellow pointer. How's it showing up on the screen? Well, if you're watching it on the big screen, it's very visible. Pink really stands out. Although I guess there's a lot of pink on there's a lot of pink going on here as well. Orange? No, they look orange. Yellow? I think yellow's the way to go. That's pretty standard. Okay. So you can see this is the yellow pointer is my pointer. You'll see their cursor is this normal looking StarCraft cursor. This big yellow one that I'm circling around right now is my cursor. So here is theoretically a big sexy Protoss Air Force. But every one of these is an extremely powerful anti-air unit. That's all they do is shoot at big spaceships and destroy them. And they're cheap and they build fast, and you can build a ton of them when it's on the creep, which is this spreading purple goo. That's how the Zerg expands. Okay.
It's terrible against Corruptors. herO needs to try to find a way to trade right now.
It's even terrible against...
And it's terrible against Corruptors. Okay. So you say, well... So you say... Hold on one sec, guys. So you've got, against heavy air units, Zerg, specifically, it's made Corruptors. They're extremely fast. They have a lot of hit points as it goes for Zerg units, which tend to be low hit points. It does a ton of air damage, and can versus massive units. Not only gets tons more damage, which obviously all of these Protoss sexy super spaceships are massive, but these upgrades down here all contribute greatly to that specialized damage. So he just sent... So right here on the screen, you had herO with this big air force for 2 seconds try and encroach. Then you have these spore crawlers, which are the anti-air ground things that look like, you know, the Sarlacc pit, or a sandworm in Dune, or the Sarlacc pit in Return of the Jedi. You have a bunch of explosive baneling, suicidal ground units to take out these spellcasters on the ground below the spaceships. And you've got these Corruptors who the only thing that they do is throw giant parasite spores at large air units. So, in every single way, Reynor, the Zerg player, is prepared for this.
Nothing is really good against...
Now here he comes again. He's trying to individually... herO, that is, the Korean Protoss player, is trying to individually pick off either units or ground forces, but is getting nothing. Getting absolutely nothing. Because his range is only slightly above what these anti-air units are. Here they come. Now he's sending infestors, which send... they don't tech directly, but they create disgusting... they create... Oh, you heard the announcers go, and I'll explain why in a second. You can see what's about to happen, maybe. But these little guys here are like Zerglings. They're little drones that get spewed out by these bigger guys and attack on their own, and they're fast. And again, they're meant to die, but kill a lot in the meantime. But what's about to... You see these... Sorry, hold on one second, guys. I thought these were Vipers. That grabbed. Oh no! These. I'm sorry. These are just. Oh wait, hold on.
He's gonna steal a couple of these stab
And then there go the air units. I'm a little confused. So, right. So anyways, let me go back a little bit. So this started with his own air units, which are specifically anti-air for large anti-units here with the corruptors. Now, I don't... This poison here is some sort of spray. I don't know if this is part of their main attack or a special. Let's go back a little bit, though. Let's go back a little bit. I'm going to turn them down a little bit, guys. So you've got the big mothership, which is actually more of a defensive like orbital defense platform, which makes sense actually, and is a smart move, because you know these tempests are supposed to be doing all of the damage.
Because you have an overseer, yeah, 30-40 lings run in there, you're gonna lose all your high tempo disruptors instantly. Yeah, that'd be terrible.
Okay, so here comes his next attempt with, I don't know, 12 tempests. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 tempests. Okay, so you look at all those units and you go, okay, they look really powerful. But each of these 10, and I guess he's got more tempests coming back from over there, cost 250 minerals and 175 gas, and gas is basically worth twice of what minerals are. So, you know, basically you can buy an entire platoon of Marines for what one of these costs. Plus, they take 5 supply east, so you can normally get 2 or 3 units for how much space these take up in terms of the size of your army. But they only have 300 total hit points, even with their shield, which is almost nothing. And while their speed is relatively big on paper, they have slow acceleration. So watch them try and move back and forth here.
Weaknesses to this army, and yet he continues to build the temps. I wouldn't mind Void Rays being mixed in. He's just added
Okay, so here you see, he is trying to get these disruptors. So these disruptors are like the suicide bombing banelings that we keep seeing Reynor use against him, but it's a single one, and they float around, and again, they look really pretty, and they can shoot off a time bomb, basically, but it's timed, and they're relatively easy to avoid if you're expecting it. So it's another complicated unit with a bunch of other complicated, expensive units. So here he comes. Now he's trying to go after the ground defenses. He doesn't even take out 2, and then here come... Sorry.
That's a lot of infestors, and Reynor,
and then he sends a bunch of infestors out there, which is actually ground support, and that's just to ensure that... I mean, I think Reynor is shocked that there isn't more ground support. He knows that there are some spellcasters on the ground here in the High Templar who can hurt him, but it's so rare for herO to have this much air and little to no ground at once that Reynor has actually overbuilt this defense army. I mean, it isn't overbuilt in terms of its success, but he thinks herO's done a better army composition than has actually happened. which is a tribute to Reynor and shows that herO isn't at the top of his game.
Actually, a lot of probes that he could take.
So that's why you don't see the air units move when these big, like, pill bugs on the ground come, because they're shooting out these gross little mini units to attack any ground units. They can't hurt the air, but look at this. Corrosive bile.
They should pick up their fungal, does connect. And now he's gonna
So that is it's a fungal attack, which comes from sorry guys, I want to make sure I want to get this right here. So yeah, So anyways, so you've got these units called infestors, which moves while they're burrowed. So they mostly are burrowed. And again, I mentioned this earlier. I mean, you can see an oracle over here, but I don't know if herO has any tracking units, any observer units that can see cloaked or burrowed enemies close enough to see what's going on. So meanwhile, Reynor has a bunch of infestors burrowed here, who again, why are the Zergs so dominant and always are? Well, they're so relatively cheap, but still relatively powerful, and can do all of these crazy things. And one of this thing is a projectile called fungal growth. Okay. What you're gonna see go against all of these big, sexy, expensive Tempests here. What does that do? Well, first of all, it launches at a speed of 15, which is 1,000,000 times faster than anyone, so you'll never outrun it. You can maybe jump away if you're really fast and have blink or teleport or something. It has a radius of over 2 for each of these, which is a huge radius, especially when you're dealing with huge units like this. But even if those are small units, anything with a radius over 2, it takes up a large amount of the screen. Reduces speed by 75%. And while they suffer only 30 damage over 3 seconds, which I suppose adds up to 90 damage if it's 30 damage per second, that's not totally clear. But even at 90 damage or 30 damage, these Tempests don't have a lot of hit points. You can see, so if you look above the Tempest here, the blue boxes are their shields. They go first, and then green are their hit points. So watch them.
steal a couple of these Tempests as well.
So stop here. So all of a sudden the shields go down, which is damage from the fungal growth and the anti-air attack. But why are these moving ahead and these aren't? Because, and it happens to be his bad luck that the ones that do still have some hit points and shield got hit by the fungal growth. Their speed is reduced to almost nothing. They're just sitting there. I don't know why they're not moving at all. I think hero's trying to save the mothership in these units at this point, and hoping that these units survive or just give up on them. I mean, this is so much money and time here.
Gonna do a lot of damage. Those units gonna retreat, and of course just gonna.
All right. So yeah. So meanwhile, so you have the infestor that did the fungal growth thing to poison them. I don't know what with all of these big, heavy, slow air units from herO the Korean Protoss player. I don't know what he was thinking in terms of the Corruptors, which are these big anti-air, basically the biggest anti-air, air-to-air attacking Zerg air units, which not only attacks units but corrupts them, which increases the damage taking. You have all of these Zerg units that, even if they don't do a lot of damage, or even if they can't take a lot of damage, they do something like this, where they do create force multipliers, as they call them, or stacking, where other units' damage is way higher than it normally would be, which is really, from a math standpoint, when you break down to it, just straight damage, it's a little bit more complicated in terms of needing A plus B to get C, as opposed to just C. But you also have the advantage of the order of operations being divided among different units and different types of units, and so it's harder to defend against, because while it's harder to construct because there's more pieces to the puzzle, it's also harder to deconstruct because there are so many pieces to that puzzle. So their attack that they did was called Caustic Spray. It's a stream of acid with 30 damage, then 7 damage per second for 4 seconds. So that comes out to 60 damage. And then 35 damage per second, which goes... How long does it go? It's called Caustic Spray. Or is that just in the campaign? Normally they have parasitic spores. Let's see, they're strong against battlecruisers, phoenixes, liberators, tempests. So basically every single large air unit from every race they're good against. Plus, they can take down Colossi, who we haven't seen here, because Colossi are so tall that they can take air damage, even though they're a ground unit. So, Caustic Spray is a channeled ability. They can't move while it's in use. Oh, that can only target enemy structures. Okay. Well, still... Nevertheless, they morph into Broodlords, which are their giant air-to-ground air units, which we're about to see, and we've already seen some. But it doesn't matter. Forget about that whole spore thing, because you've got Ravagers using the corrosive bile to slow the units down. And I guess the corrosive bile is just straight damage. I'm sorry, that wasn't not a Ravager. Not a Ravager. Sorry. What am I looking for here? So hard to keep track of all these units. Infestor, excuse me. You've got the Infestor, which dropped the fungal growth, that big poison thing, which almost completely stopped these tempests up here. And so now you've just got their air-to-air units just going to town on the Protoss massive air units, which are already vulnerable to them. And look, at 20 minutes, as I've been saying, I guess I've mentioned it in a few minutes, but just to bring back up, that at 20 minutes, in general, but especially for herO as a player and as a Protoss player, 20 minutes to try and build Tempests, which are your elite, giant, expensive air units, is a little early for him and really a little early for this game and almost any Protoss game. But he's just completing, as you see over here, air weapons level 1. Okay? And you're like, okay, great. But he's had his ground upgrade, attack upgrades. Armor upgrades are less important across the board for all types of units, for all the races. And I'll get into why. But just in terms of what you get for the money, in terms of increase of offensive power with upgrading air weapons, it's much more important to upgrade ground and air weapons. herO had upgraded his ground weapons a long time ago. He's just doing his air weapons. My feeling when playing StarCraft is to, if you can afford it and you can time it right, is to actually upgrade fully or at least partially before you ever even build any of these units. Or if they have a special thing like Blink with the Stalkers, most of these units have maybe one really powerful special attack, but you have to research it. Research that attack or that ability before you ever build them. So the first one that comes out has it, and you never have to worry about it. But certainly air weapons, because, Tempests, again, Tempests have one big ability, which is Disintegration. And it's 500 damage with a big, long disintegration beam, death ray beam that we saw herO use a couple of times. And it's 500 damage, but it takes 20 seconds. So that comes out to 25 damage per second, which is not a lot for the fact that you have to spend a ton of money and time to even get to that point, and you have to manually control it. And so while they do have just a regular attack against air and one against ground, kinetic overload is the, let's see, we're going to see the Tempest again. Yeah, they're mostly destroyed. Mostly destroyed, all the Tempests. There's the mothership. Here they are, the Tempests up here. With the big round thing and the ball of energy in the middle. I guess that's a lot of Protoss units. But they have a ground attack that can, go from 40 to 52, which is a lot, and is much heavier against structures, which is what you were seeing them try and do against the Zerg defensive structures before. He wasn't actually using their special disintegration beam. He was just using a ground attack on them. Their air attack is less powerful. It's only 30 damage. It's 22 versus massive. But I do not believe that corruptors are considered massive air units until they mutate into broodlords. Let me look that up. No, they're not. So the fact that the Tempest gets a bonus of plus 22 damage to massive air units wouldn't help them against those infestors, which did have also a massive bonus, but we're fighting these Tempests, which are massive. So so the Zerg got the benefit of that, and the Protoss didn't. Another thing on Reynor's side. But the one thing of value you get with really expensive big units is that you don't just get a +1 on an upgrade. You get a +2 to a +5. But the upgrade stats for a unit as big and expensive as the Tempest are not as good as they should be. You get +3 per level for air and +4 for ground. They should be getting at least +5 for ground. Now they do get an extra +2 for massive air, but they're not going to be fighting massive air a lot with Zerg in most cases. So he waited. Basically, what I'm saying is herO just waited way too long to get air weapon upgrades, and he's using them on the wrong units. It's not really going to change the equation for what's going on right now. But that's almost secondary to just the nonsensical and poor sequence of builds that herO's done in this game. And the only reason he survived this long is because he's such a spectacular player and manages to always survive longer than he should and mount more attacks than he should.
Like, more probes are going down somewhere in this map, and I'm starting to feel that herO is just running out of steam. Yes, he's still...
So, meanwhile, probes are going down elsewhere on the map.
I think this is an inferior army. I just don't think that this army is really capable of beating much.
Yeah, you can hear the announcer say it's an inferior army, and it's hard to disagree. As I've been pointing out, here they are with their ground attack. But even with a million Tempests, they can't even take out anybody. Now they got poisoned again. More fungal growth. They can't move. They're getting destroyed. Completely wrecked. Even though the mothership can cloak and protect, it's not doing anything because these overseers right here, which are, upgraded overlords that can transport units and they can spot units. They're not just big flying fat supply depots. They've been here spying the whole time, so the fact that the mothership can cloak this whole army makes zero difference. And boom, you look down at the bottom and the supply, heroes below 100, Reynor's still close to 200. It's all over. I was not planning on taking nearly that much time with that analysis, but it was just so glaring with how many opportunities herO had that he should not have had in this game. And if he had, despite being sloppy and complacent and what I would consider cocky in terms of his play, he shouldn't have had any of those opportunities, and yet any one of them could have won for him still, because he's such a good player and was able to rebuild so fast so many times. But Reynor hung in and took advantage of all the sloppiness, and now the momentum has totally turned. Alright, how does the mouse look on normal screen? Actually looks okay. And I can take it off by flipping back to my stream program. That's pretty fancy. Alright, so I actually haven't watched this 5th match. I know Reynor gets it, but you know what? Even though it's 2-2 and herO... Sorry, I'm yelling. I think it's a good balance. I'll try not to yell as much and keep them at the same level. But anyway, the point was, herO was up 2-1 in that series. Should not have been based on cleanliness of play. But he is that skilled and that experienced. And he was up in that game multiple times and could have won, even though it was sloppy and he wasn't playing smart. Over and over again, he wasn't playing smart. Survived way longer and had way more opportunities than he should have. But the point is, even though this is my first time watching, having watched the first 4 of 5, and watched this one in particular with you guys right there very closely, it's obvious Reynor is playing way better than herO, both objectively but also within themselves, what they're capable of. The problem is Reynor knows exactly how good herO is, but also his problems, because he's just been around so long and there's so much footage on him, and Reynor is relatively new, and herO does not know strengths and weaknesses of Reynor, and so that's another advantage for Reynor that was clearly exploited in that last game, and is going to be exploited by Reynor here for sure. So we're going to do this one, we're going to take a break, and then I think I'll start some Scarlet matches from IEM 2018 Pyongyang. Sorry, that was kind of racist. I'm just Pyongyang. I don't know how to pronounce Korean at all. I know how to speak some Chinese, but I don't know Korean for nothing. herO being a greedy boy. Yeah, they're constantly calling him greedy and sloppy and lazy. It's funny. he is just kind of crazy, and I'm sure he's more focused now that he's on elimination, and he got, I think, embarrassed in that last game.
Wow, that was an Evo. He built an evolution chamber.
So an early evolution chamber, which is this guy down here.
Oh no! I mean, at least you realize straight away, losing a few minerals, a frustrating mistake there, definitely a show of nerves.
Yeah,
Something we see players who are new to the pro scene do all the time.
I must say, I feel like I've seen it a little bit throughout the entire series, right? Like, it's always very easy to say somebody is nervous, but it's hard to actually pinpoint on like where you can see it. But I don't think Reynor was playing a bad series at all, right? Because if he was playing a bad series,
Yeah, they're saying Reynor's nervous and not playing a great series, but that's not what's going
I
on.
feel like you can see that he's playing under pressure.
Absolutely, right from map number 1.
But I think they're right about Reynor. In that Reynor should have won that last game much earlier because of how sloppy herO was. The fact that it took him 20 minutes and had to defend so much and build so many defensive units before finally winning, he was more conservative than Reynor of today is and would be in this case.
Even though it's got the slow fields, which kind of, I guess, expand it, you know, it's a map where it's not too hard to
That
get a push
robo
across.
is so fast, by the way, Big. That's a 220 robo. Like,
Pre-warp gate research.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Okay.
I mean, it could potentially be a Marjorie, but I feel like the European Zergs, they are born learning how to defend Marjorie, so we'll see. I think herO is absolutely kind of brought us to bust a build like that out once in his tournament. Reynor has gone for quite a bit of Overlord speed, but not every game.
So
This Adept's going to come in here, being as annoying as possible. He's going to get a drone. He even cancels the shade there. Reynor not prepared for this. Uh-oh.
I'm listening to them a little bit.
The wrong drone into the spore crawler there.
Reynor's having some problem with his base. He's building some things the wrong time.
Say that, but you can see it on.
And hero's just doing his normal, using an adept to be annoying.
Loses another drone there. This is getting painful, by the way.
This is herO's dream. Anything he can do, create chaos in the game is good. And he's just got both Adepts out of there.
Wow.
3 workers killed, but not just the 3 workers. Lost mining time, missed injects, and of course, I think it was like 3 or 4 spore crawler tricks, which is a lot of potential cost going into those resources not being spent on more drones.
Perfect execution there by herO. I think he did everything right, but once
So,
making a couple of misses,
sorry.
he morphed a full HP.
So it's really interesting because building an early Forge or for Terrans or the Forge or Cybernetics core for the Protoss, you expect and need early upgrades for Terrans and Protoss. But the announcers are always surprised when there's an early evolution chamber, which is the engineering bay, the upgrade building for Zerg. Because again, Zerg thrive on just building hundreds or thousands of units over the course of the game, dying, but just overwhelming with sheer numbers and atrocities, essentially. And so investing in upgrades early on, you're not doing it for Zerglings, which are very weak and you expect to die.
Lives in here deep.
But you might be investing in Ultralisks, which are their one giant melee unit,
They bring around the Reynor, like this
which
is
just look like huge, giant cockroaches, like building-sized cockroaches with pinchers. There goes the queen going after War Prism. That could have been ugly.
This is really like herO is in his element when he can just micro small units to harass his opponent down over and over. He's progressing, adding the +1 immortals and sentry.
I will say now, and I've said before, and I'll say again,
Nobody's doing fantastically. Drone
I've played Terran the most, just because I used to play the Terran campaign and multiplayer as Terran back in the original StarCraft days, and it hasn't changed that much. These days, up there's the Zerg backstabbing that Reynor is now so famous for, causing huge chaos to the main base and main workers of herO, Korean Protoss player. I've played the Zerg by far the least, and while I instinctively know how to fight them as both a Protoss and a Zerg and a Terran player because I've done it so much, when it comes to names and like how the tech tree branches out, I sometimes have to double check on it because I don't play Zerg that much, and so I don't have to build the tech tree in sort of the order. A lot of the buildings, you have multiple prerequisites before you can even build the building, before you can build the units that come out of the building. So it's a lot of trees. Got the War Prism with the Ravagers. those mid-sized guys, our roaches, are just, sort of mini tanks, mini living tanks.
It feels that almost everything went wrong, Pig, in the first few minutes of this game,
But
little Ling run by.
right, the announcers are saying it felt like everything went wrong in the first few minutes of this game to herO. We're already 6.5 minutes in, which for a herO game is pretty far. But I just want to point out that loss of units and that loss of encounter by herO is nothing compared to all the ones I pointed out in slow motion at length from that previous game. So he hasn't had an epic herO unit collapse yet, which happened at least 3 or 4 times last game before he finally lost.
Looks like he might play Roach Lurker then. Oh my god. One of those adepts is the one from the start of the game. It has 8 kills. 8 kills. Another drone goes down.
He's got an adept with 8 kills. You do have to love that as a harasser unit. Most of the added Protoss units are harasser units, which I'm not a big harasser when it comes to my playstyle, but but I do want to just take this opportunity as I watch this game for the first time and just get warmed up for the main event, which is the quarterfinals and beyond of the 2023 Masters ESL, which is going on right now, and will be starting in a few hours live, leading to the Summer Championships in Sweden next month. I do want to point out, as we're seeing herO's base building and early unit building, that part of the reason I'm being extra hard on herO is because he's actually my favorite player as someone who loves Protoss, even though I know that they're statistically inferior. He's the most creative player, but the thing that they don't talk about, yes, they talk about how creative and wacky he is. Yes, they talk about how he can get lazy and sloppy. Yes, they can talk about, all of these alternative characteristics. And the announcers are right about all of that stuff. But what they don't point out is that the 2 major parts of the macro game, the not Gambit, surprise attack part of the game, the building and expanding part of the game, when it comes to his economy, which leads to his base building and then unit building, management, and always having units being built and always just having them on the field or about to be ready to go. herO is the best because it's the hardest to do with the Protoss because they're so slow to build and have so many deficiencies. And so when he does play sloppy, you just know he's going to lose because the Protoss are statistically always underdogs. And it's always been that way in StarCraft, for better or worse. There's a little Zergling army causing problems. Alright, but I just want to point out, I'm going to pause it here. This is actually nice. It's going to be fun to watch live, especially because it's current stuff. With the 2023 Masters, but it is also fun to be able to rewind and pause here. So here, herO, 9.5 minutes into the game. So at this exact time of last game on a bigger map, first of all, look at Reynor is now the blue team and in the upper left. So at this point in the last game, he had fewer bases, or at least fewer structures. His creep had gone. The purple goo had moved much less far relative to the size of the map. And herO's first big push, which was at around this time in the first game, was so much bigger than this. It was so much bigger. You saw the size of that force. It was so many more units. Now, these ones here, these immortals, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and these big giant explosion balls here, the Novas, are very powerful and expensive, and so it's not as much smaller as it looks because he doesn't have a lot of small infantry units. Maybe he's actually hesitating to use small infantry units because they got eaten up so quickly by Reynor. Reynor's gotten in his head. Reynor destroyed those Protoss infantry, which are called zealots, so easily with the Baneling suicide bombers. Maybe herO is getting scared, and that is part of why he's building more disruptors, because that's a relatively safe way to at least try and defend against the Banelings, the Zerg suicide bombers. All right. And now he does have 4 sentries, which are just to restore shields and also to create some force fields to help break up the battlefield. I love sentries in the single player game, but and even in co-op, but in those games are much more relaxed, to say the least, and you have way more time. You can basically take as much time as you want to build a giant army. You build, 20 sentries and they seem like the best unit ever. When you only have time and money to build 4 or 5 of them, and you're going into a hectic battle, you see how quickly their shield restoration powers go down, and how quickly they go down as just being weak units. We'll see how long they last here.
And I don't have adaptive talents for my lurkers. Would you move out? I really don't think I would.
No, I think it's totally fine to just defend here. There's not that much meat to the Protoss army. You can't really shove your way in.
They're talking about how, as I mentioned, there's not a lot of meat to the Protoss army, meaning it's not a very good army. And so Reynor, who has already amassed a sizable Zerg army, doesn't need to counterattack, but he's doing it anyways. He's got tons of roaches. Here, the glowy, okay. I missed it with the Zerg. We'll get back to it. Okay, so here's the line. So this here is where the creep stops, but it keeps getting expanded by structures and by Zerg queens throughout the game. And as I'm gonna keep emphasizing, while it's great to build upgrades and while it's great to build powerful units, all Zerg need to do to get more powerful is make sure that all their battles are fought on creep, even if it's on what's technically neutral ground, because it's an automatic buff or increase to pretty much everything they do. Alright, so these are Zerg queens right here. So they used to really only do what you would think queens... Excuse me. You think queens of a brood, they would mostly focus on just increasing units and here spreading the creep. And they do those things, especially spreading the creep, but they've become powerful healers, but even more so, they become very powerful, not that expensive ground attackers. So let's see if these two can mount ground attack against this, what's becoming a sizable Protoss force. Again, Protoss, since they teleport, beam me up, Scotty, since they teleport their units in, while they're expensive, theoretically you can teleport a ton of units in instantaneously. And that's what herO relies on, is having... At least herO will have the buildings that can do that ready, so when he inevitably loses an army because he's overly aggressive, he can beam in a bunch more units and try it again. Here we go. Nope, it's only 2 queens. They smartly retreat, but Reynor is attacking in the middle at the 3rd base. I was going to say that Reynor had absolutely no chance here. So these crystals are not only what supply power physically, like a power plant, to the base, and they allow you to build more units, but you can only beam in Protoss ground units within a certain distance of the crystals. If you were playing as herO, the Korean Protoss player, if you were playing as him right now, you would see much more on this map. You'd see the field, what they call the psionic field, which is how far the crystals project. But all of these little, what you can tell if you've ever seen Star Trek is like a mid-transport, mid-teleport. He's him trying to get in units before this counterattack can get in full swing by Reynor. Now, right now, the Disruptor has done the only thing it can do that's useful, and I can't do it because it's so hard to control, is to send a time bomb in the middle of a bunch of small to medium-sized units. But it takes 2 full seconds to go. It can't move once it's set, and the other side can see it. So Reynor now has 2 full seconds to try and move these roaches, which are medium-sized ground units, out of the way. Let's see if he can do it. He cannot do it. It was a massacre. It was a massacre. Again, this is why herO is so great. He can be sloppy and imperfect at so many things, and then with one disruptor, which are so hard to control, to completely take out the counterattack of the other player. It didn't dent his overall army size, but it stopped that counterattack in literally 2 seconds, because that's how long it takes for the disruptor Nova bomb to go off. All right, here it is. Here it is. So Protoss move in one big clump. Now I'm back on the Zerg. Protoss move in one big clump, and they move slowly. So you almost always know the Protoss attack is coming. So these big glowy units are, so the Zerg units mutate, if you want, for money and or time, into bigger units or just more evolved units that have more powers, although you lose the old unit and what it can do. These are evolved roaches into Ravagers, and they are, even though it's glowing, it looks orange, they shoot up a type of, again, sort of explosive bile or poison or something like that. So they're okay ground units, which are the roaches, and now they're into pretty good anti-air units. Let's see what happens.
This game 5, both players can still win it. The winner will move on to play against.
Now again, all of these tumors here, these are actually called tumors. These are called creep tumors. So you need one of these to spread the creep, if you look at my mouse, around this much. So why does he have a bunch of them next to each other? Shouldn't he spread them out more? Well, he's doubling up on them because he's got all day for Swarm Queens to throw them out, and he wants to make sure he's got redundancy. It's basically, it's creep redundancy, because if you're a Zerg and you start losing, but then you start losing the creep, you start losing all of your advantages. All right, here we go. So the conflict is pretty much right in the middle of the map. You've got the Protoss army coming off regular ground down the ramp into a heavily fortified and heavily tumored, meaning this creep isn't going anywhere, Zerg area with a bunch of anti-ground and anti-air units. Oh, wait, I think I need to correct myself again. Excuse me. With the corrosive bile, I always get this wrong. Yeah, it's both. Yeah, sorry. These, of course, Zerg have all the advantages. So these glowy, big, mutated roaches, which are now called Ravagers, which shoot big things of gross poison in the air. It lands on air and ground units. And just so I get this right, it takes 2 seconds to land, like the Disruptor Nova bomb, but it's so much easier to get a bunch of Ravagers than it is to get a bunch of Disruptors. And it hits air and ground units, unlike the Disruptor, which only hits ground units. It destroys force fields. 60 points of damage. All right, let's see what it can do. What they can do. Oh, no, I was wrong. herO immediately starts going back up the ramp. Yeah, herO knows what's going to happen if he comes down here, and it's not going to be good for him.
That's amazing. I think he forgot that he canceled overload speed at the beginning of the game.
All right, so here we are. His army's now moving north. He's back on the creep again, because in order to move anywhere outside the middle of the map, he's going to have to be on the creep. He tried to throw some Disruptor Nova bombs over here. Didn't work. Now he's going straight into a base. Okay. So, these little round glowy units are sentries. I mentioned them before. He has a lot more than I remember because, again, herO builds Protoss units at a godly level. And they can restore shields. But if you want to forego shield restoration for immediate protection, they can create these Guardian shields, which do block out a good amount of damage. But they can only do it very occasionally. They then lose their ability to do anything else. And you have to be inside of it. And it's very hard to micromanage this, to keep all your units, including them, inside of it. You can already see up here his Centurions, who naturally charge into battle, are outside of it. So as Protoss, you're always retreating even as you're attacking for reasons like this. Now he does have some Archons who are very beefy in terms of hit points, and attack air and ground units are scary. Down here, let's see what happens. He's going after, he's going after air defenses and creep. He's going after the creep. This is a passive aggressive move by herO. He can't do a straight up attack on the Zerg base and the Zerg forces. So he's trying to slowly take nibbles out of the outer edges and at least start moving back the creep and take out some defenses.
Good adapts. I really think the MVP units here are those Vipers.
All right, here comes some Stalkers who can blink and jump around all over the place. The camera moved out of bed. Okay, so this is ridiculous that they shoot way up in the sky, but this is the corrosive bile thing. Let's see if it lands. Let's see if it lands on anything. Let's see if it lands on anything.
Now, mid-shot. The shot will not explode, it will just dissipate.
Nope.
So abduct a really good
Shot just dissipated. Okay, here comes a ton of Disruptor Novas, but these are all air units. And again, as far as, I mean, there is an Oracle here, I believe, but I don't know if herO has eyes on this area with his units, or if his physical eyes are paying attention to it. There's nothing to blow up with all of those Disruptor Novas. And now they're going to get blown up themselves. The Protoss army is getting split. He managed to burrow 2 lurkers into the Protoss base. They're just going to cause havoc. He keeps trying with the disruptors, shooting their time bombs off, but it's not happening. They're trying to defend himself with the Guardian defensive shield, but it's not happening.
He's got nothing on the ground. 7 Hydras, 2 lurkers, and a pack of Zerglings. Has herO...
Actually, this is a great push for herO.
Reynor's got to pull back. He's got to do anything he can to hang on here. And he's pulling...
Yeah, Reynor actually... I was commenting that all those disruptor explosions hit nothing, but I didn't comment on the opposite side of that, which is... Okay, it's good that Reynor didn't lose a lot of ground units, but on the other hand, where are all those ground units? And I'm looking at the numbers now, and I don't know where his army is. So this is actually a pretty good push with powerful units by herO with the Protoss army. Here come the Stalkers. But he still has lurkers, which are just giant spikes that go through your base and cause problems.
If he can hang on, he's got a chance. He's got some units here, but that's a lot of immortals. That is just too many immortals.
Tons of immortals. Oh, but there was a warp in that got stopped. We're gonna go back a little bit.
For the first time in a very long time, that prism is still going strong as well.
Big blink warp in from the left-hand side. They right-hand side. They blink in.
All right, so they're showing a little bit of damage to the Protoss base. So right here, this warp prism, it can physically transport units, but it's more important in that it can become a stationary flying Kadarian crystal, basically, pylon, and you can warp in your own units with it just sort of hovering. Of course, it can't move or defend itself, so we're going to see that here, I think. So he tries, so this is really sloppy. So in front of the army with no anti-air, I'm sorry, not anti-air. Even though these Immortals are strong at attacking ground units that are anti-air, it's not enough and they're too far back. He pushes the Warp Prism into the base, undefended, and watch. He has a couple of Hydralisks, which are ground units that shoot spikes into the air. And he tries to beam in his units, and boom, gone, right here. Those circles here. So he was about to beam in 8, I think, Centurions, which are the Protoss infantry, but they at this range they're deadly because they just charge in and kill lots of Zerg. But if the warp prism that's beaming in the units gets blown up mid-beaming of the units, they go bye-bye. Gone. Gone. And all of a sudden, he's got a few Immortals and Stalkers, herO that is. He's trying a secondary attack down to the south. So this game is, that was a great, yet again, that was a great move by Reynor to take out the Warp Prism, but it was way too easy for him. You don't send an undefended Warp Prism in the front of your army into an enemy base and expect that you're going to have enough time to unfold the Warp Prism and then the 4 or 5 seconds it takes to beam the units down and for them to get fully beamed and it to survive so that it all happened. I mean, I think he looks at Reynor physically, who looks like he's 12 here, and thinks this kid has no idea what he's doing. That's almost an insulting move. But he's still in the game, is herO.
Lurkers and Vipers are incredible units right now. They actually hard counter herO's army. herO's recognize this though. He's making a Templar Archives. Archon's going to be a great way to spend his gas, but most importantly, High Templar and feedback are going to shut those Vipers down.
I'm just so worried about the economy of Reynor, man. 41 drones, that's really not much. Then on top of that, the 4th and 5th got picked off. Those are more important bases.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Reynor does have a supply issue with a smaller-ish army and not a lot of workers. But herO really, yet again, lost momentum when he had the advantage. And so it's going to buy time for Reynor.
Those blinding clouds in the end were super important. I thought it was over. I really thought Reynor was down and out.
Yeah, the announcer just said he thought Reynor was down and out. If I didn't know the results of this, I would have thought so too. And this is why this is going to end up being such a big win for Reynor early on in his career.
Back to 50 workers. He can't build more drones than this until he can secure a new 4th base. Right now, he just does not have the units, so it's just more Lurkers, more Zerglings trying to build up.
They're still talking like Reynor's just trying to stay alive. Because they are looking at the number of bases, which is favoring herO, and they're looking at the number of units, which is favoring herO, but he's just not ever getting a base attack through the way he wants to in like 3 straight games. Well, thanks you for joining me for my meta cast of a cast here. Can't wait to do this live, hopefully, at the Masters in a few hours. And we're going to come back in a little bit into Scarlet's big first major championship win in Korea in 2018, the IEM finals. We'll get to that in a little bit. But let's finish up Reynor and herO here. So Vipers are really annoying units because they fly around and they don't do anything other than have giant tongues that grossly suck you into the middle of the bad guys and do damage. They just look scary, and boy, when those tongues shoot out and grab something giant like an immortal or a tank. Yeah, Reynor's starting to get more of those underground units into the base. Yep. Obliterated 2 immortals with the abduction there from those awful Vipers. herO still doing good work. Lost in another observer, so he keeps losing his spy units. Here's some oracles so he can see stuff again, because these burrowing units that do damage from underground are really giving herO fits, as they do anyone who's played against Zerg players. Yeah. And not only are lurkers kind of unfair in that they're attacking from underground and easy to move around while burrowed, but you get them from Hydralisks, which are already powerful and cheap anti-air ground units. So either way, you're getting awesome units out of the Hydralisks. I mean, again, I'm going to briefly stop. If you look at the map, you know, the one thing Zerg, really need in mid to late game, and now at almost 18 minutes, we're definitely well into the mid game, heading towards later game. You know, if you just looked at the map, just like if you looked at the numbers, you'd say herO, the Korean Protoss player, was for sure winning with all of these red bases here on the eastern side. But because he's just building up the east, he's not gaining any territory that's helping him defend ground towards Reynor. This is just to produce minerals and gas. And again, it's effective from a straight economic strategy, but he has all of these entrances that are open to counterattack by Reynor. Again, you can tell this is, even if you couldn't see how young Reynor was here, or know, because I've been telling you, or see 2019, if you didn't know this was young Reynor, you wouldn't think this was Reynor at all, because now Reynor would be sending a bunch of cheap units into all of these bases to harass them. herO's leaving himself way wide open, but more importantly, to this particular matchup, he's not gaining any territory in the middle of the map. The Zerg can get neutral territory by the creep. That's obvious. The purple goo. They can keep spreading the purple goo. It mostly keeps going forward. It doesn't get smaller. And Protoss can have a single base and win a game, but still the entire map will be covered with purple goo, which makes the Zerg units stronger. On top of a million other things. The Terran units, who we don't have here, the humans, they have giant siege units like tanks on the ground and giant liberators flying air fortresses in the air, which just obliterate entire armies from stationary standpoints, so they can take over neutral ground in the middle of the map through their units. Protoss don't have a good way of doing this. Even if you try and put sort of small to medium-sized armies at different points in the middle of the map, it's just too hard to control, and they don't have, their stationary defenses are too expensive and not powerful enough. And so herO's getting tons of money and therefore able to beam in tons of units by building all these bases. That's great, but he's running out of resources and he's not gaining any territory momentum physically or just in terms of the flow of the game by just building up the east side and not doing any expansion into the middle.
Was not something that we thought he was going to be able to do, but while moving those
I'm enjoying the pause while I still have it because I'm not going to be able to do this live.
He kept his initial third base alive and now he's getting his fourth base as well.
Yeah, okay, but he's got some bases where he's got a potential to have 16 workers working. He's only got 6. But we just saw a base where he had 31 workers working on a mineral patch that could only handle 5. So his workers, he's way understaffed or way overstaffed at every base.
Important that the Lings or an overseer
Here, 31 out of 14. So that's 17 workers that are just sitting around doing nothing, especially when other bases need them. Now here you can see blue on the mini map is a big push by Reynor to the northeast base, which is like I've been saying, because he started from the southeast, each increasing base to the north is less valuable for any reason other than just getting you resources. These bases at least are in the middle of the map, even though they're on the east side, so you can start moving towards the middle, both with units in specific attacks, or hopefully expanding your base, your official base, or just base of operations, like I was talking about with the Terrans, how they can just plant tanks in other stationary units to control neutral area. But this northeast base, which we're at the second to most north, Reynor is about to attack, I believe, the most north base. Each of these bases is here just for minerals and gas, and almost nothing else has been spent on protection. One shield battery, one carrier, one photon cannon, completely exposed, not a lot of units. Reynor should end it here, or the beginning of the end, with this attack. Let's see what happens. I promise I won't stop it again. Here we go. Okay, he does end up going to the second to most north first, but he can easily get to the other one. I mean, sorry to stop it again. I know I said I wouldn't, but there's a ramp here and there's a wall here. This is a horrible position because the enemy who's coming from the west can easily go to the north base, the south base, or both, which is of course what Reynor is going to do at the same time, or come here and then go to both. So this position really, other than not having creep on it yet, is an advantage to the Zerg attackers. And at the same time, it's almost impossible to get the slow ground units of the Protoss between these two because there's just this tiny ramp. Unless you teleport them somehow, he's going to try and get his units out. I don't think this is going to be enough.
Well, the Immortals are getting picked up on board.
Yeah, Immortals are just getting destroyed by the Ravagers.
Is at 3. The Hydra count is at 17. 17 Hydras can win that fight because once again the carriers do not have upgrades.
No upgrades on the carriers. He's holding them back. Those Ravagers just tearing apart those bases, which had no defenses, no protection. He's losing his High Templar, which are his spellcasters. And here come the Hydras to take down the carriers. Okay, the Zealots do get some of the Hydras. Now the Hydras are coming back. Yep, see, he abducted a carrier with that Viper, with the tongue pull.
I think Reynor is starting to do it big. I really think he is.
Yep. Now he's coming to the other base because it's unprotected. And now we're seeing Reynor's micro skills. Pulls two carriers. Two carriers go down. The other two are going to go down quickly. They lost their interceptors, so they look impressive, but they can't do anything. Yeah, Reynor with a small economy, which means normally you shouldn't win as a Zerg. But with these burrowing Ravagers, he has absolutely no chance. He has no chance. With these Lurkers and these Ravagers.
This is still an army that can absolutely do some damage. Does he still have robos or something? What about a disruptor? Can he squeeze that in? Is that possible?
Right, I'm not sure if he's going to have time to. He's going to go for the base trade now. A good call here by herO. Now remember, he's just used a recall. He's sneaking probes out of that northern base. He's accepting that most of his bases are going to go down here. Hydraling moving back across the map. The Lurkers mostly still on the north side here.
Just listening to the announcers.
But we have 28 Hydras at this point.
He blinks on the Vipers. Both Vipers go down. One abduct gets off in time.
He does take out the Vipers, but now he's got tons of Hydras. And herO just gives in. It happened so fast. Because herO still has an army of 70, which is okay at this point. But this is Actually, I've been talking about herO being sloppy. Reynor finally takes a chance at the end of the 5th and final game after playing very conservatively and only getting to this point because herO's been playing one of his worst games I've ever seen herO play against the young, but now very well established Reynor. I don't know if herO's just unable to defend or if he doesn't know it. But if herO was able to stop this extended attack, which goes for about a minute or two, he would be back in the game because Reynor's economy and Zerg base is so tiny right now. But he just manages to get through. Let's watch that end sequence again, and then we'll take a break.
The Zealots are getting ruined. The Zealots just took so much damage. If those Zealots get on the Hydras, that's huge. The Hydras are in trouble right now. He's pulling back. He wants to engage just the Interceptors on their own.
I think he can fight 3 carriers, but it's going to
Abducts.
be 4 carriers now. He's gonna abduct one of
Right,
them.
there goes the carrier.
Damage. Storm does land on these Hydras, but this game is still so close. I think Reynor is starting to do it big. I really think he is.
Yeah, that huge group of Ravagers is just...
He's so focused on microing this army forwards. Are we going to see another abduct? Yes, we are. A full health carrier. Another one.
Oh
2 abducts,
goodness.
2 carriers fall. That's
Lurkers, I mean.
It's wrecked.
Yeah, the carriers go down, and immediately herO's supplies down to 46, and his overall supply 113. Numbers, despite the fact that herO should have a ton of money and a ton of bases, it's not going to matter.
Carriers are now flying paperweights for the next 2 minutes. The Hydras and Lurkers winning this battle. Reynor, how is he doing this? His economy's being
How is he doing it is the question. I have no idea. I have no idea.
I have never seen this many Zerg units out of 47 drones. I really don't know where he's getting these Hydras from. But we've got 24 Hydras now.
Yeah,
Losing is important.
yeah, Reynor just sacrificed all of his building drones to make military units, to make a rush, and he picked the right time to do it. He picked the right time to do it. So here we go. So now herO does what he should do, which is counterattack the small and relatively poor and pathetic Reynor bases with a bunch of units, but they're spread out. The Oracles, again, which are more harassing finesse units, should not be up front without protection.
Can he squeeze that in? Is that possible?
Right, I'm not sure if he's going to have time to. He's going to go for the base trade now. A good call here by herO.
Here come 3 carriers.
Recall. He's sneaking probes out of that northern base. He's accepting that most of his bases are going to go down here. Hydraling moving back across.
Oh yeah, herO's given up on the bases. He knows he's lost that battle. Right, so the Protoss jump in, do take out a bunch of valuable Zerg units.
Oh, he blinks on the Vipers. Both Vipers go down.
But he blinked in the middle of the army and lost his units too, and immediately he's down to 34. Where does the actual... Oh, he's already only at 50. Okay, so yeah, it was already lost when his army was here. Alright, well-deserved first major victory for herO, for Reynor, back in 2019. He's an exciting and fun player to watch, to say the least. I feel bad for my boy herO, but he did not deserve to win this series, in my opinion. He did not deserve to win the series, in my opinion. So we'll be back soon with some more coverage. Reynor, well done, well done. All right, well, thank you for joining me, and we will be back soon with Scarlet 2018 run, IEM.
I have absolutely nothing to say, Big. That was so sick. What a victory by Reynor in the end here. At his first series ever at the WCS Global Finals. He was down 2-1. Game 5, you could see the nerves. He's building an Evo chamber. He's morphing the wrong drones into spore crawlers. He fell behind at one point. He was in a good spot and suddenly in a terrible spot. But in the end, he had a tiny window to still win it before the carrier count would get out of control. And somehow he got the job done. Amazing. What a best of 5.
What a wild game. I mean, this is such a Reynor game as well. I feel like he ends up in these situations so often where it's just down to the wire every single unit. And I mean, I felt he was actually looking really good. And then the Zealot positioning, those Zealots got in the mineral line. We saw a flank from 2 sides breaking the Lurkers. Some of that magic which only herO could have made happen in that game.
Remember that Prism snipe in the natural? If he doesn't snipe the Prism there, I think it's just game over. I think that would have been it. I think herO would have just run away with the best of 5. Absolutely amazing. Reynor does win it. He will move on to play against herO in the winners match.
Goodness. In the bottom left side of Royal Blood, we are taking a look at the main base of our Red Protoss. He is hailing from France and representing the Platinum Heroes as well. This is DNS.
And his opponent spawning up at the top right from Storm Gaming. It is Geralt. Yeah, this is rather interesting because I was talking about recent history, and while DNS does have the advantage overall, in the last 7 series, Geralt is 6-1. He is the one who has won a lot more of those series overall. Total, it is 22-10 in favor of DNS. But I mean, yeah, 6-1 in the last 7 is a